بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا وسيئات اعمالنا، من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له، واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله. نبدا باذن الله تعالى في هذا اليوم. اسال الله سبحانه وتعالى لي وللجميع التوفيق والسداد بدراسه كتاب منهج السالكين وتوضيح الفقه في الدين للشيخ العلامة عبدالرحمن بن ناصر السعدري رحمه الله تعالى. نعم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ما بعد, then we start today in a series of lessons covering the book منهج السالكين وتوضيح الفقه في الدين. This book was authored by a scholar called الشيخ عبدالرحمن بن ناصر السعدري رحمه الله.
لماذا ندرس الفقه؟ لو قال لنا قائل لماذا ندرس الفقه؟ نعم.
Why should we study fiqh? If somebody was to ask us, why should we study fiqh? Why do you study fiqh?
لأن العبادة لا تقبل إلا بالإخلاص والمتابعة لهدي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. الإخلاص، ولهذا ندرس التوحيد، والمتابعة لهدي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، ولهذا ندرس الفقه. نعم.
Because an act of worship is not accepted by Allah except with two conditions. The first condition is al-ikhlas, and the second condition is mutaba', following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we say al-ikhlas, sincerity, then this is in studying aqidah and tawheed. When we say al-mutaba', following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for this reason we study fiqh.
على ماذا يحتوي الفقه؟ يعني ندرس في الفقه، ما هي الأبواب التي سوف ندرسها بإذن الله تعالى في الفقه؟ نعم.
So the subject area of fiqh, what does it include? Which subjects do we cover and study when we talk about studying fiqh?
الفقه والله أعلم ينقسم إلى قسمين.
So fiqh, the study of fiqh, is divided into two categories.
عبادات ومعاملات. نعم.
Al-ibadat, which is the fiqh of the worship of Allah, the acts of worship, and then the other subject area is mu'amalat, i.e. those transactions that we do.
وسوف يأتي معنا أن المعاملات يلحق بها شيء، لا أشكال في هذا. نعم.
نعم شيخ.
المعاملات سوف يلحق بها شيء ولا أشكال في هذا التقسيم، عبادات ومعاملات. نعم.
So again, both these two types, there's ibadat, which is worship, and mu'amalat, which are transactions.
في العبادات أركان الإسلام، ونضيف إلى أركان الإسلام كتاب الجهاد. نعم.
And therefore, al-ibadat are the pillars of al-Islam, and also with the pillars of al-Islam is the chapter of jihad.
يعني نبدأ بإذن الله تعالى بأركان الإسلام، شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. ثم في هذا شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله سنذكر كتاب الطهارة، لأنه لابد من طهارة الباطن قبل طهارة الظاهر، ولابد للصلاة من مفتاح الصلاة الطهارة. ثم بعد هذا نعم.
So we begin first in the five pillars of Islam by studying shahadat la ilaha illallah wa anna muhammadan rasulullah. And this is because, and in this is at-tahara, eye purification. So before we have the physical type of purification, we have to have the spiritual type of purification. And the prayer, it has its keys. And the key for the prayer is at-tahara, purification.
ثم إذا تطهر الآن يصلي، فنأتي بكتاب الصلاة.
So now if a person has purified himself, then the next thing he does is he prays. And therefore we come to the book of as-salah, prayer.
ثم هناك من الصلوات ما تكون فرائض، ومن الصلوات ما تكون نوافل. نعم.
And then from amongst the prayers are those prayers which are an obligation, fara'id, and there are also other prayers which are voluntary.
ويذكر الفقهاء رحمهم الله تعالى بعد كتاب الصلاة كتاب الجنائز، لأن أكثر ما ينتفع به الإنسان بعد موته الصلاة عليه. نعم.
And then the fuqaha rahimahumullah, they mention after the book of prayer, the book of salah, they mention the book of janaiz, the book of funerals, because the most that person benefits after his death is when people pray over him.
ثم الزكاة.
And then after this, the chapter of az-zakat.
ثم الصيام.
And then the chapter of fasting.
ثم الحج.
And then the chapter of al-hajj, pilgrimage.
ثم الجهاد.
And then after this, the chapter of al-jihad.
إذا نبدأ الآن بكتاب الطهارة.
So therefore, we want to begin now with the chapter of purification.
لا بد أن نعلم أن الطهارة تنقسم إلى قسمين.
We have to know that purification, it is of two types.
طهارة معنوية وطهارة حسية.
Spiritual purification and physical purification.
أهم ما يكون من الطهارة هي الطهارة المعنوية، أي تتطهر من الشرك. نعم.
So the most important type of purification is the spiritual purification, meaning a person purifies himself from a shirk.
إذا لابد من إخلاص الدين لله سبحانه وتعالى.
So therefore a person has to purify his religion for the sake of Allah.
وإفراد الله سبحانه وتعالى بأنواع التوحيد الثلاثة.
And to single out Allah Azza wa Jal with the three types of Tawheed.
والبراءة من الشرك وأهله.
And also that a person frees himself and disassociates from a shirk and also the people of shirk.
فأي عبادة لا يمكن أن تقبل إلا بالإسلام.
Therefore, any action, any act of worship is not accepted without Islam.
فإذا كان لديه نسأل الله العافية والسلامة شيء من الشرك الأكبر حتى ولو كان هذا الشيء شيء قليل جدا لا تقبل العبادة. نعم.
If a person has something within from the aspects of a shirk, then nothing is accepted from him in terms of worship.
إذن أهم ما يكون من الطهارة من أقسام الطهارة التي ذكرنا الطهارة المعنوية. إنما المشركون نجس. نعم.
So the most important aspect of purification that a person must have is the spiritual purification. Because Allah said in the Quran, indeed the mushrikun, the people of shirk, are impure.
رجل مسجون مقيد بالسلاسل لا يستطيع أن يستقبل القبلة ولا يستطيع أن يتطهر ولا يستطيع القيام ولا مثلا أنه لا يستطيع كذلك ستر العورة فيصلي على حاله وصلاة هذا صحيحة. لكن لو صلى نسأل الله العافية والسلامة بعد أن تطهر واستقبل القبلة وستر العورة وهو مشرك شرك أكبر فالعبادة باطلة. نعم.
If a person was in jail, imprisoned, and he was chained, and he wasn't able to purify himself in terms of making wudu, and he wasn't able to face the qibla, and he wasn't able to cover his aura, and then he prayed in his state, then his prayer would be accepted. Totally his prayer would be accepted. But if you have a situation of another person, and this person, he faces the qibla, and he purifies himself in terms of making wudu, and he covers his aura, but he prays and he's falling into shirk al-akbar, then none of his prayer is accepted.
إذا يبدأ الفقهاء رحمهم الله تعالى في كتب الفقه بكتاب الطهارة. نعم.
So because of this, the fuqaha, may Allah have mercy upon them, they start their books of fiqh by mentioning the chapter of at-tahara, purification.
لماذا؟
Why?
أرادوا طهارة الباطن قبل طهارة الظاهر.
Because first they want to cover or study the purification of that which is inside and hidden before the purification of that which is apparent.
ولأن الطهارة مفتاح الصلاة وتتقدم على الصلاة فلا بد أن نقدم لك الأشياء التي تأتي بها من الشروط أي قبل الصلاة.
And because at-tahara, purification, it is the key to the prayer. And therefore it comes before the prayer. So if it comes before the prayer, then also in terms of studying fiqh, then we study tahara before we study the prayer.
فالطهارة تنقسم إلى قسمين، طهارة معنوية وضد هذه الطهارة نسأل الله العافية والسلام الشرك، والثانية الطهارة الحسية. نعم.
And therefore at-tahara, purification, it is of two types. At-tahara al-ma'nawiyya, the spiritual form of purification, and the opposite to this is a-shirk, and we ask Allah for safety and pardoning, and then the physical type of purification.
أما الطهارة الحسية فتنقسم إلى قسمين. نعم.
In terms of physical purification, then this is of two types.
الطهارة من الحدث الأكبر ويكون بالاغتسال، والطهارة من الحدث الأصغر ويكون بالوضوء.
A person purifying himself from major impurity, and this is done through performing ghusl, and a person purifying himself from minor impurity, and this is by making wudu.
والثاني الطهارة من النجاسات في البدن والبقعة والثوب. في البدن أي على الجسم، والبقعة على المكان الذي يصلي فيه، والثوب الذي يصلي فيه كذلك. نعم.
And then we also have purification in terms of a person's body, the place and clothes. So purification, purifying a person purifying his body in terms of the impurities that touch his body. A person purifying the place that he's praying in from impurities. And also a person purifying or cleaning his clothes that he prays in.
إذا الطهارة الحسية إما أن تكون من طهارة حدث أكبر وأصغر، أو الطهارة من النجاسة للبدن والبقعة والثوب. نعم.
So once again, physical purification is either purification from major form of impurity or minor form of impurity, or a person purifying the place that he's praying in, or his body, or his clothes from any impurities.
والطهارة الأصل أن تكون الطهارة بماذا؟ بالماء، وهذا هو الأصل. وإن لم يقدر على استعمال الماء أو فقد الماء ينتقل من الطهارة بالماء إلى الطهارة بالتراب. نعم.
So the main thing, or the first thing that you use in order to purify yourselves with is water. This is the base of at-tahara, physical purification. If a person cannot find water in order to purify himself with, then he goes on to purifying himself with at-turab, which is soil or sand.
إذا الطهارة تكون بالماء وهو الأصل، أو بالفرع التراب وهو فرع عن الماء. نعم.
So purification, physical purification of tahara is done through water, and this is the main origin. And if a person cannot find water, then purification is done through a turab, which is soil.
والماء ينقسم إلى قسمين، طهور ونجس.
And there are two types of water, that which is pure and that which is impure.
فالماء الطهور هو الماء الباقي على خلقته.
So the water
على أصله يعني، سواء نزل من السماء أو نبع من الأرض. نعم.
So the water which is pure, then this is the water which remains upon its original state. Whether it's water which has come down from the skies, or water which is gushing forth from the earth.
فإن تغير الماء بنجاسة، ولكن هذه النجاسة أثرت فيه، تغير أحد أوصاف الماء الثلاثة، الطعم أو اللون أو الريح، ينتقل من الطهورية إلى النجاسة. نعم.
If this water now changes because of an impurity which affects and influences the water, so for example the water changes because of this impurity in terms of its taste changes because of the impurity mixed in it, or its smell changes because of the impurity mixed in it, or its color changes because of the impurity that's mixed in it, then this water now goes from being pure to being impure.
ويجب علينا أن نتحرى في الماء القليل ما لا نتحرى في الماء الكثير، أي نتحرى أن الماء لم يتغير بنجاسة تؤثر فيه في الطعم أو اللون أو الريح. نعم.
And we have to be careful about when we're using a small amount of water in terms of its purity or impurity, more than we care about large amounts of water. So when we have a small amount of water, we have to make sure that its taste hasn't changed, and its color hasn't changed, and its smell hasn't changed due to any impurity mixed in it.
إذا يبحث الفقهاء رحمهم الله تعالى في هذا الكتاب، في كتاب الطهارة المعنوية وضد هذا الشرك، يعني الطهارة من الشرك. نعم.
So the fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh, may Allah have mercy upon them, when they're teaching or when they're studying the book of tahara, then they study or they talk about first الطهارة المعنوية, i.e. the spiritual form of purification, and its opposite is الشرك.
نعم. وكذلك الوضوء.
And also they study الوضوء, ablution.
والاغتسال.
And also الغسل.
والتيمم.
And also they study التيمم.
والأشياء النجسة.
And they also study those things which are impure.
وكيفية تطهير البدن والبقعة والثوب.
And how a person should purify his body and the place and his clothing.
وأقسام المياه.
And also the different types of water.
والماء جوهر سيال لابد أن يوضع في إناء، ولذلك يبحث الفقهاء أيضا في هذا الباب باب الآنية، يذكرون في هذا الكتاب باب الآنية. نعم.
And within the book of At-Tahara, they always mention the chapter of utensils, and this is because water, it is a liquid, it's a pure form of liquid, and therefore this liquid has to be contained in something, i.e. a utensil. So because of this, they also study the chapter of utensils.
ويذكرون كذلك ما يتعلق بالحيض والنفاس.
And then in the chapter of At-Tahara, purification, they also mention those things which relate to menstruation and bleeding due to pregnancy.
نبدأ بإذن الله تعالى بالطهارة الحسية. كما ذكرنا أن الطهارة الحسية تكون إما طهارة بدن أو طهارة، إما طهارة من حدث أكبر وأصغر أو طهارة للبدن والبقعة والثوب. نعم.
We begin by now mentioning the purification which is physical purification. And as we mentioned, this can either be purification from a major form of impurity or a minor form of impurity, الحدث الأكبر and الحدث الأصغر, or it can also be a person purifying the place that he is praying in, or purifying his clothing, or purifying his body.
الوضوء.
Wudu, ablution.
الوضوء يا أخواننا لابد له من شروط. نعم.
So ablution, al-wudu, it has certain conditions that we have to fulfill.
فالشرط الأول من شروط الوضوء على ما تقدم معنا طهارة باطن الإسلام.
Therefore, the first condition of wudu, of ablution, is that which we have just said, a person purifying his inside.
فلو توضأ المشرك شرك أكبر نسأل الله العافية والسلام فوضوء باطل، يعني سب الرب عياذا بالله ثم توضأ فهذا وضوء باطل. نعم.
If a person who is a person of shirk akbar, the major form of shirk, and then he makes the perfect ablution, his wudu is still not accepted. We have a person, for example, who insults and swears to the Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he makes wudu. His wudu is not accepted.
والعقل فلو توضأ المجنون فوضوء باطل، ومن باب أولى لو توضأ السكران. نعم.
And also the second condition of ablution is al-aql, a person having sound intelligence. And therefore, if a person who is insane or he is mentally disabled and he makes wudu, then his wudu is not accepted. And more than this, if a person who is drunk with alcohol or intoxicated, he makes wudu, then similarly his wudu is not accepted.
الشرط الثالث من شروط الوضوء التمييز، وهو التفريق بين الأشياء. فإذا كان لدينا ولد صغير وتوضأ هذا الصغير، هل وضوءه صحيح؟ ننظر. إذا كان يفرق بين الأشياء تقول له اجلس يجلس، تعال يأتي، يعرف السؤال والجواب ويعرف أن هذا ماء وهذا نار، فوضوءه صحيح، وإلا فوضوءه باطل. نعم.
And then the third condition of ablution of wudu is at-tamyiz, meaning the small child being at an age whereby he can differentiate between different matters. So if we have a child now and he performs wudu, and we want to know that is this child's wudu ablution accepted or not, correct or not, then we ask him, is he at the age whereby he can distinguish between different things? If we tell him to sit, he comes and sits. If we tell him to stand, he stands. He distinguishes between water, he distinguishes between fire, for example. If he can do this and he has reached the age of at-tamyiz, whereby he can distinguish between these various things, then his ablution is correct and accepted.
الشرط الرابع من شروط الوضوء النية.
And the fourth condition from the conditions of wudu is the intention.
فهل يصح أن يقول اللهم إني نويت أن أتوضأ في هذا اليوم يوم الثلاثاء الموافق 29 من شهر شوال عام 1435 متوضئا في دولة بريطانيا في مدينة شيفيلد ناويا الصلاة صلاة الفجر بتوقيت شيفيلد الساعة 5:10 مؤتما بالشيخ فلان وفلان، هل يصح هذا؟ نعم.
So we said regarding the intention, does this mean therefore that when a person makes wudu, he has to say that I am intending to make this wudu with this water in the city of Sheffield on this date in order to pray the prayer behind Sheikh Muhammad with the timing of Sheffield, which is 5:10? Is this what it means?
لا.
No.
النية محلها القلب.
Rather the intention, its place is in the heart.
والتلفظ بها بدعة في كل العبادات على ما سيأتي معنا بإذن الله تعالى.
And therefore pronouncing or saying the intention upon the tongue, this is now a bid'ah, an innovation. And this is the same in all of the different acts of worship.
إذن النية محلها القلب والتلفظ بها بدعة. هذا الشرط الرابع من شروط الوضوء.
So therefore the fourth condition is an-niyyah, a person's intention, and the place of a person's intention is in the heart, and to pronounce the intention upon the tongue is an innovation.
ثم لابد أن هذه النية تكون من أول الوضوء إلى نهاية الوضوء، لا ينوي قطع نية الوضوء في وسط الوضوء. نعم.
And a person has to have this intention from the beginning of his wudu all the way throughout and to the end of the wudu. So a person doesn't break his intention or break the intention of wudu throughout his ablution.
ثم بعد هذا من شروط الوضوء لابد من انقطاع موجب الوضوء. لا يصح أنه يتوضأ مثلا وهو يأكل لحم جزور. نعم.
And also from the conditions of ablution is that when a person is performing wudu, then those things which necessitate wudu has to stop. So for example, it's not correct for a person to make wudu and whilst he's making wudu he's eating the meat of a camel.
أو وهو يعني أكرمكم الله يقول مثلا في الحمام أخذ يتوضأ، هل يصح هذا؟ لا يصح، لابد من انقطاع موجب الوضوء. نعم.
Or for example, a person أكرمكم الله he urinates and then at the same time he's making wudu. Is this correct? No. Why? Because a person first has to stop that thing which necessitates him to make wudu and then he makes ablution.
وإذا كان هذا الموجب للوضوء لابد له من استنجاء أو استجمار، يعني استعمال للماء أو للحجارة، فلا بد من الاستنجاء والاستجمار قبل الوضوء كذلك. نعم.
And if a person is urinating or answering the call of nature, then he has to make istinja or istijmar. Istinja using water to clean his private parts, or istijmar which is using stones to purify himself.
يعني الآن بعد أن أكل لحم جزور أو خرج منه ريح، هل لهذا الناقض للوضوء استنجاء أو استجمار؟ لا، إذن هنا لا استنجاء ولا استجمار، يتوضأ مباشرة. نعم.
If a person he breaks his wudu because of eating camel meat or because of passing wind, for example, does this mean that this person now has to perform istinja or istijmar? No. So istinja and istijmar is only done when a person answers the call of nature. Otherwise, he just makes wudu without this.
مثلا تبول وبعد الأنبال أراد أن يتوضأ، نقول لا، لابد من الاستنجاء والاستجمار، لأن هذا الناقض الوضوء لابد له من استنجاء واستجمار قبل الوضوء. نعم.
A person, for example, he urinates and now he wants to perform ablution, make wudu. We say to him, first make istinja or istijmar, first clean yourself with water or with stones, and then you can make ablution.
كذلك طهورية الماء وإباحته، إذا وجد ماء نجس ولم يجد ماء طهور فماذا يصنع؟ يتيمم، أو لم يجد ماء وهناك عند إنسان ماء قال لا أعطني هذا الماء، تبيعني هذا الماء، لم يوافق، هل يسرق هذا الماء ويتوضأ؟ لا، هنا يتيمم. نعم.
And also the next condition of making ablution is that the water itself has to be pure. So if, for example, we find water and this water in itself is impure, we don't use this water, rather we make a tayammum. Or we have another example where we don't have any water, we make a tayammum. Or we have another example whereby there's somebody owns some water, but he's not selling us this water, or neither is he giving it to us. Do we therefore go and steal this water? No, we make a tayammum.
كذلك إزالة ما يمنع وصول الماء إلى البشرة، كان يعمل مثلا في طلاء الجدران وعلى يده مثلا عجين أو شيء من الطلاء، أو على أظافر المرأة شيء يسميه عند الناس بالمناكير، يعني بمنكرات كثيرة، لابد من إزالة هذه المنكرات حتى يصح الوضوء. نعم.
And also the next condition of ablution is a person removing from his body anything which prevents the water touching his skin or reaching his body, reaching those limbs. So for example, if a person is working and he has on him, let's say, some cement, for example, because he's working, or some plaster because he's working, or some dough due to cooking, then before making wudu, you have to remove these things in order for the water to touch your skin.
أتى بشروط الوضوء، الآن نأتي بفروض الوضوء.
Once we have completed the conditions of wudu that we have just mentioned, now we will talk about the obligations of wudu.
فروض الوضوء 6. نعم.
So the obligations of wudu, those things which we have to do during ablution, are 6.
غسل الوجه مع المضمضة والاستنشاق.
A person has to wash his face along with rinsing his mouth and his nose.
واليدين مع المرفقين.
A person has to wash his hands all the way to and including the elbows.
ومسح الرأس مع الأذنين.
A person has to wipe over his head and his ears.
وغسل الرجلين مع الكعبين.
And a person has to wash his feet up to and including his ankles.
والترتيب أن يرتب على ما جاء عن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام.
And then the next condition is that a person has to do this in the sequence or the order which the Prophet ﷺ used to do it.
والموالاة أي المتابعة، يعني لا يقطع ويفصل بين عضو وعضو، وبخاصة في أيام الصيف، لأن العضو يكون العضو الذي قبل هذا قد جف إذا كان الفاصل طويل. نعم.
And also the last condition, the sixth obligation of wudu is that when a person is making his ablution, then he does one limb straight after the other limb, and he doesn't leave too much gap between washing each limb. And this is more so the case in the summer, because in the summer, if you wash one limb and then you leave a bit of time, it dries. And therefore, a person has to wash each limb straight away, immediately after the other limb.
نواقض الوضوء.
And then the next thing we need to understand are the nawaqid of wudu, those things which break or invalidate a person's wudu.
الخارج من السبيلين مطلقا، خارج من القبل أو من الدبر، سواء كان من ذكر أو من أنثى، كل خارج من السبيلين فهو ناقض الوضوء.
Anything which comes out from a person's private parts, from the front or the back, whether it's a male or a female, anything which is discharged from a person's private parts, then this invalidates and breaks a person's wudu.
بول أو غائط.
So whether this is urine or feces,
أو ريح،
or passing of wind,
أو حصى،
or it is حصى
صغير،
or if it is like very small stones,
أو ديدان دود،
or if it's like
worms,
small worms or small insects,
أو حيض أو نفاس أو دم،
or it is blood, whether it's the blood of menstruation or postnatal bleeding or any type of blood.
كل خارج من السبيلين فهو ناقض الوضوء.
So any discharge, anything which is discharged from a person's private parts, then this invalidates and breaks a person's ablution.
كذلك إذا خرج البول أو الغائط من غير يكون له يعني مثلا أنبوب يخرج منه، هذا نسأل الله العافية والسلامة. نعم.
And also if urine is discharged from a place other than his private parts. Some people, they have a particular illness whereby they have a bag here and urine comes out of there. This then breaks a person's ablution.
نعم. كذلك زوال العقل، يعني يزول عقله سواء كان بنوم أو إغماء أو سكر أو جنون أو مخدر. نعم.
And then the next invalidator of wudu, the next action which invalidates a person's ablution is for a person to lose his consciousness.
يعني لا يشعر بنفسه إذا خرج منه شيء. نعم.
A person, he loses his consciousness or his intellect. This can either be a person sleeping, or a person who becomes insane, a person who becomes intoxicated, or a person again who uses intoxications or drugs. Meaning that a person reaches a state whereby he doesn't know whether something is being discharged from his body.
نوم,
sleeping,
أو سكر,
intoxication,
أو إغماء,
or a person being unconscious or fainting,
أو أعطي شيء من البنج مثلا أو المخدر بالمستشفى.
And again, if a person is given any type of anesthetic or medicine which makes him lose his consciousness.
النوم ليس بناقض الوضوء.
So a non-sleeping in itself, it does not break a person's wudu, sleeping in itself.
لكن هو مظنة لخروج الريح.
But when a person sleeps, then there's a strong probability that maybe he has passed wind.
فننظر في حاله. غلب شيء من النعاس وقال أن أشعر بنفسي أنه لم يخرج مني شيء، فهذا وضوء صحيح. وإذا كان غلب شيء من النعاس وقال لا أدري هل خرج مني أو لا، فقد انتقض وضوءه. نعم.
So we look at the person's situation in terms of sleeping. If a level of slumber or tiredness or sleep overcomes him, then if he says that, I fell into very light sleep, but I was aware of that which was happening around me. I was aware that nothing has been discharged from my body, I haven't passed wind, for example, then his ablution is correct. But if this sleep and this slumber which has overtaken him, it is to an extent whereby he doesn't know at all that which was happening around him, or he doesn't know and he isn't aware of whether something was discharged from his body, whether he passed wind, then in this case we say that he has broken his ablution.
أكل لحم الإبل خاصة.
And also from those matters which invalidate a person's wudu is eating the meat of camel, specifically the meat of camel.
مس الذكر يستحب، إذا مس الذكر بيده يستحب له الوضوء. نعم.
And also a person touching his private parts at the front. If a person touches his private part at the front, then it is mustahab. It is highly recommended for him to make ablution.
وهذا هو المس. أما هذا إذا كان بحال هذا ليس بمس أصلا.
So when we say touching, we mean touching skin upon skin. As for touching it like this, where you have between your skin some clothing, then we don't. This isn't must. This isn't touching.
والردة نسأل الله العافية والسلامة لأنها محبطة لكل الأعمال.
And also from those matters which invalidate a person's wudu is a ridda, i.e. apostasy, a person leaving the fold of Islam, because through a person leaving the fold of Islam, then this corrupts or loses all of his actions.
صفة الوضوء.
The next thing is the description of wudu, the description of performing ablution.
أن ينوي بقلبه.
That a person intends to make the ablution in his heart.
ثم يسمي يقول بسم الله.
Then a person mentions the name of Allah by saying Bismillah.
ثم يغسل الكفين 3 مرات.
And then the person, he washes his hands 3 times.
وفي نوم الليل يجب عليه إذا استيقظ من نوم الليل أن يغسل الكفين 3 قبل إدخالهما في الإناء.
And when a person wakes up from his sleep at night, when he wakes up from his sleep of the night, then it's an obligation for him to wash his hands and his palms 3 times before he enters his hands into the utensil of water.
وإلا فغسل الكفين مستحب.
Otherwise, if it's not from sleeping at night, then the washing of the hands 3 times, this is something which is recommended.
ثم يأخذ ماء ويضع في كفه اليمنى.
And then a person, he takes water and he places it in his right hand.
يتمضمض بأن يدخل الماء في فيه ويستنشق بأن يسحب الماء بمنخريه. نعم.
And he enters the water into his mouth and also into his nostrils, and then he spits out the water and also he rinses his nostrils.
ثم يخرج الماء من فيه ويستنثر بأن يخرج الماء من منخريه بيده اليسرى.
So after putting water in his mouth and his nostrils, then he blows out the water from his mouth, he spits it out, and also he rinses his nostrils with his left hand.
مرة أو مرتين أو 3 مرات.
Either this can be done either once or twice or 3 times.
يغسل الوجه من منبت الشعر المعتاد إلى أسفل الذقن طولا ومن شحمة الأذن إلى شحمة الأذن عرضا.
And then after this, the next stage in making wudu is a person, he washes his face. And he washes his face from the beginning of his hair at the top all the way to the bottom of his chin going down, and then from one earlobe to the other earlobe.
ويستحب له تخليل اللحية بأن يدخل الماء داخل شعر اللحية. نعم.
And also it's mustahab, meaning it's highly recommended, not a wajib, but highly recommended for a person to use his hands and to wash his beard like with water in his hands like this.
هذا إذا كانت اللحية كثيفة فالتخليل مستحب.
So this is if a person has a heavy beard, then it is recommended.
أما إذا كانت اللحية خفيفة بأن يرى الخد أسفل من اللحية فالتخليل هنا واجب. نعم.
As for if a person, his beard is naturally very light, such that through his beard a person can easily see the bottom of his skin, for example, then he has to, as an obligation, wipe through his beard.
مرة أو مرتين أو 3 مرات.
And again, this wiping of the face or washing the face with water can be done once or twice or 3 times.
ثم يغسل اليد اليمنى، يبدأ من أطراف الأصابع حتى يستوعب المرفقين. نعم. ولا يشرع في العضد، يعني لا يغسل العضد. نعم.
And then the next stage is for a person to begin with his right arm, and he washes from his fingertips all the way to his elbows, including washing his elbows. So the elbows are included in washing the arm. However, he doesn't then go and start washing his upper arm.
يبدأ باليد اليمنى ثم اليد اليسرى.
So he begins with his right hand and his right arm, and then he moves on to the left arm.
ثم يمسح الرأس. يمسح لا يغسل. نعم.
And then after this, a person, he wipes over his head. So he doesn't wash his head with water, rather he wipes over it with wet hands.
يبدأ بمقدمة الرأس إلى قفاه، ثم يعود مرة أخرى ويدخل سباحتيه في صماخي أذنيه ويمسح بالإبهام ظاهرهما. نعم.
A person, he begins with wet hands, wiping the front of his head, or the front of his head, the top of his head. He takes it all the way to the back, and then he brings his hands right to the front again. And then after this, he wipes his ears with his fingers. He uses his 2 index fingers to wash or to wipe the inside of his ears, and his 2 thumbs to wipe over the outside of the ears.
ولا يكتفي كما يصنع بعض الناس بأن يمسح فقط مقدمة الرأس.
And it's not permitted for a person to just, as some people do, wipe the beginning of their head.
ولا يمسح الرقبة.
And neither does he wipe over his neck.
ثم يغسل الرجل اليمنى مع الكعبين.
And then after this, he washes his right foot, including his ankles.
ويخلل بين أصابع الرجلين بخنصرين.
And also, he washes between each toe with his small finger.
يبدأ باليمنى ثم اليسرى.
And he begins by his right foot up to his, and including his ankle, and then his left foot up to and including the ankle.
ثم بعد هذا يصلي، أو قبل هذا يقول الدعاء الوارد عن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. نعم.
And then after this, after completing the ablution, a person says the supplication which the Prophet ﷺ used to say.
صفة التيمم.
And then he prays. Now, the next subject is the description of how to make a tayammum.
التيمم ينوي أولا بقلبه ولا يتلفظ بلسانه.
So the description of making a tayammum is that a person, he makes the intention in his heart, not on his tongue.
ثم يضرب ضربة واحدة بباطن الكفين على الأرض، سواء كانت الأرض من تراب أو من طين أو من رمل أو من حصى أو من صخر. نعم.
And then the next step is that a person, he places the palms of his hands upon the earth once. Like this, he places the palms of his hands upon the earth once. And this can be either earth that he places his hands on can either be soil, or it can be sand, or it can be turab, ramal,
وطين،
or it can be clay, or it can be stones.
طيب. إذن ينوي بقلبه.
So he makes the intention in his heart, not upon his tongue.
يسمي بسم الله.
He says Bismillah, mentions the name of Allah.
يضرب ضربة واحدة بباطن كفيه على الأرض.
He places his palms once upon the earth.
على الأرض سواء كانت من تراب أو من طين أو من رمل أو من حصى أو من صخر.
Whether it's soil or clay, or whether it's sand, or whether it's small stones or a large rock.
ثم يضرب إحدى كفيه بالأخرى أو ينفخ فيهما إذا علق بهما شيء من التراب. نعم.
And then a person, he can wipe his hand like this or blow over them once, especially if he has something, some soil or some sand or something stuck to his hands. He can blow it away or just wipe it like this.
ثم يمسح ظاهر الوجه.
And then he wipes over his face.
بدون تخليل.
And he doesn't have to now split his beard like this.
ثم ظاهر الكفة اليمنى ثم ظاهر الكفة اليسرى بدون تخليل كذلك بالأصابع.
And then he wipes over the back of his right hand and the back of his left hand, and this is why without dividing the fingers.
ينوي.
So a person, he makes the intention,
يسمي,
says Bismillah, mentions the name of Allah,
ضربة واحدة على الأرض,
places his hands once upon the earth,
ثم يضرب أحد كفيه بالأخرى أو ينفخ.
and then he wipes his hands or he blows over them.
ثم يمسح الوجه.
And then he wipes over his face.
وظاهر الكف اليمنى ثم ظاهر الكف اليسرى.
And the back of his right hand and the back of his left hand.
صفة الاغتسال.
Now the description of a person making ghusl, which is the ritual bathing.
الاغتسال على قسمين.
So making ghusl, the ritual bathing, is of two types.
لدينا اغتسال مستحب كامل وهو اغتسال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
So we have the recommended form of, or the perfect manner of making ghusl. And this is the ghusl that the Prophet ﷺ used to make.
ولدينا اغتسال مجزئ.
And then we have the minimum level of ghusl that a person can make, and this is accepted and corrected, just the minimum level.
الاغتسال الكامل المستحب أعلى اغتسال واغتسال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
So the ghusl which is highly recommended, the ghusl which is in the most perfect form, the ghusl which the Prophet ﷺ used to make is
أولا يغسل الفرجين القبل والدبر.
Is that firstly a person begins by washing his private parts, the front and the back.
ثم ينوي بقلبه.
And then a person, he makes the intention in his heart.
ثم يسمي.
And then a person says that Bismillah, he mentions the name of Allah.
ويبدأ يتوضأ وضوء للصلاة يغسل الكفين.
And then he starts by making the wudu, the normal ablution that he makes for the prayer, i.e. he washes his hands.
يتمضمض ويستنشق ويستنثر.
And as mentioned, he rinses his mouth and his nostrils and he blows out.
ويغسل الوجه ويخلل ولا بد اللحية هنا وجوبا.
And he then washes his face and then he splits between the beard with water. And here he has to do it as an obligation.
ثم اليد اليمنى.
And then he washes his right arm.
ثم اليسرى.
And then his left arm.
ثم يغسل الرأس ويرويه بالماء حتى يتحقق من وصول الماء إلى أصل البشرة مع الأذنين.
And then he doesn't wipe over the head. Rather, he washes the head and he also washes the hair, making sure that the water is reaching the roots of his hair, and using his fingertips to wash the root of his hair, and also he washes and wipes his ears.
ثم يغسل الشق الأيمن كاملا.
And then he uses water to wash or shower the right side of his body, all of it.
ثم الشق الأيسر كاملا.
And then uses water to shower or to wash all over the left side of his body.
ثم يغسل الرجلين اليمنى ثم اليسرى.
And then after this, upon finishing, he washes his feet, the right and then the left.
هذا اغتسال كامل. اغتسال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أعلى اغتسال.
So this is the most recommended, the highest, the most perfect form of making ghusl, which is the ghusl of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
الثاني اغتسال مجزئ.
And then the second type of ghusl is the minimum level which is correct and accepted.
ينوي بقلبه.
That a person, he intends it with his heart.
يسمي.
And then he says Bismillah, he mentions the name of Allah.
يعمم جميع البدن بالماء وما تحت الشعور الخفيفة والكثيفة.
And then a person, he covers or he showers or he bathes all of his body in water, including his hair and the roots of his hair.
مع المضمضة والاستنشاق.
And also rinsing his mouth and his nostrils.
لو توضأ على الوضوء يخرج ويصلي به ولا إشكال فيه.
So if this person, he performs the ghusl in this manner, in simply, as the Sheikh mentioned, after the intention of Bismillah, he just bathes his whole body in water and he washes his mouth and his nostrils, then he has the perfect, then his ghusl is accepted and he can pray any prayer.
ينوي.
A person, he makes the intention in his heart.
يسمي.
He mentions the name of Allah by saying Bismillah.
يعمم جميع البدن بالماء ما تحت الشعور الخفيفة والكثيفة.
He bathes all of his body in water, covers all of his body in water, as well as
مع المضمضة والاستنشاق.
as well as making sure the water reaches the roots of his hair and then rinsing his mouth and his nostrils.
نعم هذا ما يتعلق بصفة الوضوء والتيمم والاغتسال.
So this is what relates to the fiqh of, or the descriptions of making wudu, and the description of making a tayammum, and the description of a person making ghusl.
الله أعلم نكتفي بهذا المقدار ونكمل إن شاء الله تعالى متى بعد الظهر ولا قبل الظهر؟
إن شاء الله شوف الشيخ
بعد صلاة الظهر إن شاء الله تعالى. طيب والله أعلم صلى الله على نبينا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم.
إن شاء الله بعد صلاة الظهر نكمل المشوار إن شاء الله مع فضيلة الشيخ هيثم. جزاه الله خير بارك الله فيك. إن شاء الله يكون حرف الكلمات في ميزان حسناته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. في هذا اليوم المبارك لنا موعد مع ضيف كريم فضيلة الشيخ هيثم السرحان، المدرس والأستاذ بالمسجد النبوي. لديه دورة في الفقه وفي الشريعة الإسلامية بمسجد الرحمن بمدينة شيفيلد بريطانيا. كانت الساعة الأولى في صلاة الفجر والحمد لله كانت على ما يرام وفيها فوائد عظيمة. أسأل الله عز وجل أن يجعلنا جميعا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. والآن إن شاء الله ستكون الحلقة الثانية بعد صلاة الظهر. إن شاء الله سيكمل ما انتهى به المطاف في صلاة الفجر. أسأل الله عز وجل أن يجزي الشيخ عنا خير الجزاء ويجعل كل ما تكلم به وتفوه به في ميزان حسناته يوم القيامة. جزاه الله عنا كل خير أصالة عن نفسي ونيابة عن إخواني بمسجد الرحمن. نتقدم بالشكر الجزيل لكل من ساهم وشارك وساعد في إنجاز هذه الدورة المباركة من مصورين ومن مبدعين ومن مشاركين ومن كاتبي الإعلانات. جزاهم الله عنا كل خير. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.